We all know the HPV vaccine has been a massive game changer for public health, literally preventing thousands of cancer cases. But that success actually brings up a brand new, really tricky question. With a limited budget, who should be next in line to get the shot?
You've probably heard about it, right? For years, the focus has been on vaccinating young girls, and it's been a massive success in preventing diseases like cervical cancer. And that success, that's really the starting point for the tough questions we're going to tackle today.
So that leads to the central question of this whole explainer. We've got a vaccine that we know works incredibly well. But does that mean we should just expand it to every other group? Older women, men? The answer, as you're about to see, is way more complicated than you might think.
Okay, to figure this out, we have to talk about a concept called cost effectiveness. And it's not just about, does this thing work? It's about asking, is this the absolute best way to spend our limited public health dollars to save the most lives? Think of it like this. Your city has a budget to fix roads. They can't fix every single pothole, right? So they have to pick the repairs that will prevent the most accidents and do the most good. Public health is exactly like that. It's all about getting the biggest health bang for your buck.
All right, let's open our first case file, women over the age of 26. Now, this group wasn't part of that initial big vaccination push, so the question is, does it make sense to bring them into the fold now?
Wow, the numbers here tell a pretty stark story. A review of 6 big studies found that, for the most part, vaccinating this group just wasn't cost-effective. The cost per quality life year gained, which is basically 1 year of perfect health, was sky-high, sometimes close to $200,000.
So you gotta ask, why? Why the high price tag for not a lot of benefit? Well, it boils down to a couple of key things. First, many women over 26 have already been exposed to HPV in their lives, which means the vaccine just isn't as helpful for them. And second, the cost of the shot is just too high compared to the relatively small number of cancer cases it would actually prevent in this specific group.
So, the verdict on our first case file is pretty clear-cut. From a public health standpoint, it's just unlikely to be a good use of our limited resources. Case closed.
All right, case file number 2. Heterosexual men. And you know what? This is where the picture gets a whole lot murkier.
Yeah, check this out. We're looking at 26 different studies, and the results are kind of all over the place. Sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no. It really all comes down to one crucial factor. How many women in the population are already vaccinated? If a lot of women are already protected, then men get protected too, through what we call herd immunity. That makes a whole separate program for them, well, a lot less impactful.
So you can see why this isn't a simple yes or no. It's like trying to hit a moving target. The math completely changes depending on other factors, too. For example, the newer vaccines that protect against more HPV strains, they're much more cost-effective. And of course, if the price of the vaccine drops, or you only need 2 doses instead of 3, that can completely tip the scales.
So what's the verdict on this one? It's a big it depends. That absolutely can be a good investment, but really only if the conditions are just right, like if not many women are vaccinated and the price is low. It's a strategic call, not a blanket yes or no. Okay, let's open our third and final case file. Men who have sex with men, or MSM. And folks, this is where the story takes a very, very sharp turn. Unlike the last case, the research here is crystal clear. We're talking unanimous. Every single study concluded that vaccinating MSM is absolutely cost-effective. And just look at that cost per quality life here. It's dramatically lower than what we saw with older women. That makes it a much, much smarter public health investment.
So what makes this group so different? Why is it such a clear-cut yes? Well, it's a few things, really. First, MSM are at a significantly higher risk for certain HPV-related cancers. And second, and this is key, they just don't get the same benefit from that herd immunity we talked about from female vaccination programs. All this means a targeted program for them is incredibly effective and impactful.
So, the verdict for our final case? It's an absolute resounding yes. The evidence is solid. Targeted vaccination for MSM is a highly cost-effective public health strategy.
All right, this chart right here, this pretty much sums up our entire investigation. You can see the story in one simple visual. We go from low cost-effectiveness for women over 26 to that murky mixed result for heterosexual men, and finally to a crystal clear high for men who have sex with men. The data really points us toward a clear set of priorities.
Okay, so after looking at all that data, what's the big takeaway? Where should public health officials actually focus their efforts and their money?
Well, the researchers who did this analysis don't mince words.
They say that once you have a solid vaccination program for girls up and running, the very next priority should be a targeted program for men who have sex with men.
So what we're left with is a really clear roadmap, a set of priorities. Step 1. Make sure you have a strong, established program for young girls. That's the foundation. Step 2. Prioritize creating a targeted program for MSM. And then, Step 3, you can start to consider expanding to heterosexual men, especially as the price of the vaccine continues to drop.
But I want to leave you with one final thought, a bit of a curveball. All of these recommendations, all this math, it's based on today's prices and today's science. But what happens is vaccines get cheaper, and maybe we only need 2 doses. This entire equation could flip on its head all over again. The question of who's next? It's not settled for good. It's a conversation we're absolutely going to need to keep having.